Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, hi, I'm Bree. Today I'm going to give you a guide to planting garlic. This is one of my favorite things to grow. I find it to be very easy for my area. I know that in certain areas of the country, it can be a little bit trickier with some of the pests you have, but overall it's kind of a set it and forget it crop, and I love those. There's not much to it, and honestly you get such a nice big harvest at the beginning of the gardening season. At least I do. So today I'm going to give you a guide to planting all things garlic. I have 10 different categories here that I'm going to break up this video, so I will leave timestamps down below for you, and at the very end we will do a little garlic unboxing. Let's go ahead and just jump right into how to plant garlic and everything in between. When to plant garlic. So this is going to obviously depend on where you live and where you're at in this world, but if you are in North America, typically you are planting your garlic between now and sometime in November. So for me, I live in Kansas, and I personally like to wait until my first frost has kind of passed. Where I'm at in Kansas, we tend to kind of stay a bit warmer, so I have found to wait until that first frost comes, which for me typically is the 3rd to 4th week of October. I've been planting my garlic that very last week of October for the last few years, and it's worked really well for me. A good rule of thumb is to plant at least a month before you start dealing with a lot of hard freezes. Hard freezes are when you're dipping into the 20s or when your ground starts to get hard. You want to have enough time where your clove roots out a little bit. So my best advice on this is to figure out when your first average frost is and go from there. If it's already passed, check when your hard freezes come, because you can still have an appropriate window. I have seen some people plant a few weeks before. If you don't plant, you're not going to get anything, but if you plant, there's still a chance you're going to get something. So again, get it in the ground about a month before you start experiencing hard freezes, and you should be good to go. Where to buy garlic? So there's plenty of places you can buy garlic. A lot of your local nurseries will also have seed garlic. So if you are getting to this video late and you feel like you need a rush, definitely call around and check some of your garden nurseries around. They might have some for you. That way you're not waiting on shipping or anything. But for me, I have always loved to order from Mad River Garlic Growers. They are the only garlic seed I've ever ordered from. I originally found them years ago when I was searching for organic seed garlic, and I stumbled on them because they are a very similar growing zone to me. They are in Ohio, which tends to be very similar to here in Kansas, and I was like, all right, well, if they can grow all these varieties, I should be able to grow them pretty easily too. So I've always ordered from Mad River Garlic Growers. They have over 40 different organic garlic varieties, hardneck and softneck varieties, so I definitely suggest checking them out. I've always had a really great experience with them, and I've always gotten really good seed garlic from them. So I did check their website yesterday, and it looked like they had many varieties in stock. I will also say, if you don't order from them, they also have a lot of really good information on growing garlic that I have always tended to gravitate towards, so definitely check that out. I'll have them linked in the description below for you guys. All right, so different kinds of garlic and what to grow for your area. So I highly suggest checking out your local ag extension office. This is typically your ag college in your state. So for me, it is K-State around here, and they are such a good resource for finding out what varieties can do well in your state. This is originally how I found my favorite variety called Chestnut Red, which is a hardneck variety. And in my extension office, they have always said that hardneck varieties do better for me than softneck varieties. So I never grew softneck until this last year, but on that same extension website under garlic, they also listed a handful of softneck varieties that did well in Kansas, and I decided to do that this last year. So I planted a softneck variety. It's doing really well. It's storing really well, and I'm very happy about it. Those extension offices can give you a really good idea on what garlic varieties do well for your area. And again, if you find a similar seed garlic farm like I did that's in a similar zone, a lot of those varieties should do fairly decent for you. If they can grow it, you can probably grow it too, but definitely check out your local ag. You can typically just do a Google search for your area, and it should pull up some very good varieties. One of the varieties that it originally told me that I have grown every single year is Chestnut Red. This honestly has to be one of my absolute favorite varieties. It is a hardneck variety. Hardneck varieties tend to not store as long as soft neck varieties, and that's one reason why I really wanted to play around with some soft neck varieties. The hard neck varieties definitely aren't as long storage, but the flavor of them is so amazing that I highly suggest. Hard necks will typically store for about a 4 to 7 month period, 7 at best. Typically for me, I can get about 5 to 6 months on most of my hard neck varieties. And then for soft neck, you're looking at about 8 to 12 months. And that's one reason why I really wanted to try to incorporate some of those soft necks this year, is because I typically have a gap in my fresh garlic that I'm able to store. I still have a good amount stored, and I have a lot of soft necks, so I'm really excited to go into the winter months with that. That is kind of one of those things to look out for, especially if you're looking for more of a storage variety. I like to use a lot of my hard neck varieties on the front end, and then my soft neck will get used later in this winter. A few of the other ones I really enjoy is Italian purple. So Italian purple, when you roast it, gets really, really buttery. The chestnut red, oh my gosh, it's hard to explain the chestnut. Like, the Italian purple gets really buttery, but the chestnut red just has this distinct flavor that is so amazing when you roast it. Georgian Fire is another good one. For soft neck in Kansas, if you're looking for a variety, I've grown one called Isham Red, which really did well for me last year. I plan to grow it again this next year. I've also done German White and German Red. Those have both done well. I've done Spanish Roja, which I will say I really liked the flavor of that, but that was probably the least amount of storage I've ever gotten out of garlic. I think that one ranged closer to that 4-month side. So the one thing I like about the Mad River Garlic Growers website is they tell you storage quality of those bulbs, because the papery skin around the garlic is one of those indicators on how well it can really store. And if it's a little bit looser, you might not have as good of storage time. Tips for planting day and what to amend with. So my biggest tip for planting day is, if you don't have a dibber tool, which I will put one across the screen here, it is so handy when you are making holes to plant out your garlic. This is like the one tool I feel like you need when planting garlic. That you can typically find them for like $5, $10. Highly suggest. Now, when it comes to amending, I am a strong believer to get a soil test, but if obviously we are in the planting garlic time now, soil tests, especially if you send them off, can take about 4 to 6 weeks to get back to you. So if you can get one of those at-home tests, that will at least give you some type of guideline. That way you're not adding anything to your garden beds you may not need, and so forth. I also suggest, when you're doing like one of those at-home tests, to go ahead and do the pH, because when you are planting garlic really likes a neutral pH, and pH can really affect on how much nutrients the plant absorbs. So pH is actually pretty important when it comes to those things. For me, I typically like to add something neutral to my beds. I like to add compost. I've also done this garden soil amendment that has kelp and worm castings in it. That has worked really well for me over the years. So yeah, if you can get a pH or soil test, or even an at-home one, I've used the little you can get off Amazon, and have had really good results doing that. So highly suggest doing that, and also just potentially adding some compost into your soil at planting time. How to plant garlic. So I have my garlic head here. I'm going to show you. You are simply just going to remove as much of this papery layer as you possibly can. And what you're going to do is just separate out the cloves. So when you're doing this, I will say, in my experience, clove size always kind of matters when planting. The bigger the clove going into the ground, the bigger the garlic head is when coming out of the ground. I don't know how truthful that is, but in my experience, that has been true. So when you go to plant garlic, a good rule of thumb is always leave that paper layer on. When you're planting them in the ground, you want to plant them pointy side up. This is where all of your greens will come out. And then this flat base area is where all of your roots will come out. I have played around with spacing over the years. A good general guide frame, a lot of people tell you, is around 6 inches apart. This last year, I did closer to 8 inches apart and had way better success with more uniform bulbs and not having such variation between bigger and smaller bulbs when I went to go harvest. I really, really liked that 8 inches apart. I was a little unsure just because I am in a small backyard garden. I always try to cram as much as I possibly can. I've even gone closer to that 5-inch mark before, but I will say I will probably always plant my garlic about 8 inches apart because of how well those results were. When planting, you want to have about double the depth of the clove. So when you are making your hole in the ground after you have everything 8 inches apart, you want to have about double. So you're looking at about 2 to 3 inches in the ground where it will sit. So this is that surface level of the garlic, and this will be the base of your hole. You want to have at least like an inch there on top. So again, I like to plant 8 inches apart, 2 to 3 inches deep, pointy side up with the base down, because that is where the roots come out. I believe softneck varieties aren't as crazy on the direction the clove goes in the ground, but I always just do pointy side up because that is one way to remember. So this is actually a good garlic head to kind of give you guys an example, because sometimes when you get seed garlic, you might have one random clove that has started to rot away. That's pretty typical, especially this time of year. That is something you do not want to plant. All the other cloves around it will be completely fine, so just keep that in mind and toss away anything that doesn't look good. If it doesn't look good going into the ground, it's not going to do well. So that is kind of the gist on that. It's really easy, and again, that dibber tool makes such a difference when you're making holes. I will also say, if you have a yardstick, I have found a yardstick to be one of the best things when you're planting, because then that way you can at least kind of keep your line straight. And sometimes you can't gauge what 8 inches or 6 inches is, and you might end up being closer than you really think. So I really suggest getting a yardstick, a dibber, and that is as simple as that. So you plant that in the ground, you put your soil back over the top, and then what I do at that point is I layer a few inches of straw mulch. So I like to find a seed-free straw mulch. I've always really enjoyed using Easy Straw. This is something you can find at Lowe's, a lot of your garden centers. It is garden safe. It isn't certified organic, but everything I've read, it's fine for organic use. I'm pretty stickler about things like that. But finding a seed-free straw is going to be game changers, because that straw is going to help insulate your garlic from extreme cold, but it's also going to help with water retention. So when it comes to those fall and winter months, you will water really well at planting, but typically you really don't have to do too much at that point. You check throughout the winter, put your finger in the ground, and if the soil starts to get dry at the tip of your finger, about 2 to 3 inches deep, it's probably time to water. But for the most part, over fall and winter, you probably won't have to do much watering. So I only put a few inches of that straw mulch though down at planting, and then about 4 weeks later, once we really start to cool down and then I start seeing some of that green growth come out of the garlic, I will layer a few more inches of straw at that time. Typically by the end of winter going into early spring, I have layered about 4 to 6 inches of straw mulch, and having it seed free really helps. So if you don't have seed free, you're going to be dealing with a lot of weeds or just straw sprouting. And one thing garlic absolutely hates is any type of weed pressure. It will really affect your garlic. So you really have to be on top of your weeding. Highly suggest weeding your bed prior, but seed-free straw is one of those things you should seek out. It's what I've always used. So that's kind of the gist on planting garlic there. I kind of just put my next topic of maintenance over winter in the planting of the garlic, because honestly, you really don't have to do much. Again, just check to see, especially if you had a very, very dry fall into winter, especially during those first few weeks of getting the garlic established. During this time of year, I'm typically not even watering that much because we don't have that much daylight and things like that. So just keep an eye out on things and you should be in the clear with that. All right, so now your garlic is planted, you are coasting through. There's really not much you're going to be doing for a few months on end here, which is the beauty of garlic. It's a set it and forget it. So once late winter, early spring comes, for me it's more late winter, it's like end of February, I start to notice the greens growing. So actually, if I backtrack just a little bit, so you will read some things back and forth on the green growth that happens in the winter. So I've had green growth that has reached 6 inches before our frost really makes everything go dormant, and I've never had an issue. And we get extremely cold here to the point where we have feel likes in the negatives. Sometimes our highs are in the single digits. Never had a problem. If you are dealing with extreme cold for long periods of time, maybe layer a little bit more mulch on to help insulate things just a little bit more. But I've never had any issue with stress with that green growth. So typically you'll have about 4 to 6 inches of garlic popping up before it goes dormant. That is something I did want to mention there, because I typically get a lot of questions on what am I doing? Should my garlic be growing at this point? You'll have some garlic growth go on. If you don't, that's fine. You might have a little less, which is fine. I like to really try to only have a few inches sticking up before it starts to go dormant. But in that late winter, early spring, when you start noticing growth happen, it is time to start feeding your garlic pretty regularly at that point. So again, I highly suggest doing some type of soil testing before you start feeding your garlic, simply because you don't know exactly what your soil might be lacking, and you don't want to be giving too much of something that it doesn't need and not enough of something else. In my experience, I have always done a lot of blood meal and bone meal, but over this last year I started doing foliar feeds with a fish and seaweed fertilizer, and that was game changer for me. So in this garden, I typically end up being low in nitrogen and phosphorus and a little bit high in potassium. So that fish and seaweed fertilizer I really like because it's higher in nitrogen and phosphorus and low in the potassium area. With the fish and seaweed fertilizer, I started hitting this stuff every 10 to 14 days. It's a little bit more tedious than something granule. You do want to make sure you are feeding your garlic pretty regularly once you start noticing that growth happening in the late winter, early spring. And I will say, Mad River garlic growers, they have a whole guide on planting garlic that also gives their recommendations on fertilizing, which is pretty close to what I do. There is one little tweak I might try to do a little bit more this winter, but they are a really good guide, and those are the things I really like to use. And again, for me, that typically is late February, early March, depending on how our winter season is. I did want to mention, I have personally never covered my garlic before until this last winter. We had a really cold stretch at the end of winter, and the garlic already put on a lot of growth, and I didn't want that growth to get stressed out or damaged because we were going to be in the teens and also have some ice. So I did cover them for that situation, but I've never covered them other than that. So signs your harvest is coming. So about 4 weeks before harvest time, you are going to probably cut all of your fertilizing completely back. At that point, your garlic is gonna take all the nutrients it's already absorbed and really focus on bulb development, and you don't wanna try to trigger any more green growth at that point. So cut all of your fertilizing about a month out. An indicator that you are about a month out from your harvest, your hardneck varieties will actually send up something called a scape. So the scape is a flower that ends up forming, and you do remove this with hardneck garlic once it starts to curl, which again is typically about a month before your harvest. And by removing it, it's been said that all of that energy will go toward bulb development versus a flower seed development, and that is one reason for removing it. Your softneck varieties won't send up any type of scape. So an indicator for your softneck is simply watching your leaves. So when you go to harvest your garlic, you want about half of your leaves to die back before pulling it. So 5 to 6 leaves completely died back from the bottom, and that is a good indicator it's time to pull your garlic. So each one of those leaves is one of these papery layers when it comes to the garlic. So you don't want to pull too early because then your bulb might not be developed quite yet, but you don't want to pull too late either where you're having so much of those leaves die back, because that is also going to decrease your storage quality. Right in the middle, I've always found to be the best time to pull. Typically your bulbs are really developed at that point, and you have a lot of nice papery layers that help protect your garlic in that storage and helps it store for longer. And then if you let too many die back, you can actually just end up having your garlic rot in the ground, which is not what you want either. All right, so harvest time. For me, harvest typically is the first, second week of June, which is quite a bit earlier than a lot of other people. I see some people that harvest between July and August, and a lot of the forums I've always read say a July harvest, so this really threw me off in the beginning. But I've grown garlic for so many years now, and it typically all conks out around the same time. And for me, it's that first to second week of June. So typically by the first, second week of May, I'm seeing all those indicators that I'm getting really close to harvest time. So now during harvest day, what I like to do is I like to remove all of that mulch off before I start pulling anything. This will help all that mulch not get like just intertwined into your soil, and then that way you can also reuse it. And then once I pull up the garlic, I simply dust off any soil that might be remaining and I leave it as is. So I do like to try to cut back on water that last week of planting garlic, so that way when I am pulling up my garlic, it's not a muddy mess and it has a bunch of soil just attached to it. And that is all I do when it comes to like cleaning it up before curing. All right, so curing and storage. This is one of my favorite times because now you're just playing the waiting game for about 3 to 4 weeks for your garlic to dry. So I get all of my garlic harvested and then I move it into my garage. My garage has worked so well over the years. I have this system where we put some hog paneling up with some 2x4s just to help with that airflow, and having it up on the wall where I hang it keeps it out of the way and I'm not having to worry about much. A lot of people have a garage to some degree or some type of area on their front porch. You want something covered away from the elements. You don't want it to have a lot of sunshine. And I found my garage to work really, really well. I will say if you are putting it somewhere that isn't outdoors that has good airflow, make sure you have multiple fans going to help with that good airflow. But I bring all of my garlic in, and what I like to do is I like to string it up because I am hanging it up, and I will just do clusters of about 5. That way I can count everything pretty easily, and then that way everything has enough room. I have done it in the past where I've done about 8 to 10 per cluster. 5 for me I think works best. And what I do when I am tying everything up is I lay it flat on the ground and I tie it up, and then that way they're kind of already fanned out. All the garlic has a lot of airflow, and then I just take the twine and I tie it to that hog panel, and it stays up there for about 3 to 4 weeks. For me, it's typically around 4 weeks, and sometimes I will pull one of my garlics off if I'm going to use it for dinner, and I will go ahead and cut it. And the good indicator here is when you're seeing no green where that stem was. If you see any type of green, let it go longer because that way it's not fully dry yet. And then it's just really a waiting game. Again, have really good airflow. I like to have 2 to 3 fans on this wall at all times. And that's all I really do when it comes to curing the garlic. Now, when it comes to storage, once your garlic is cured, I take everything down, and this is where I clean up the garlic some more. So I will typically remove about 1 layer of that papery layer, paper layers at the time, just to remove any extra dirt that might still be on the garlic at that point. And then I actually cut down all of my hardnecks. Hardnecks are one of those things that aren't easy to braid, so I don't even attempt to braid them. I just cut them about 2 to 3 inches like that and call it a day. With soft necks though, you can braid them, so you don't cut any of those stalks off. You just use it to help braid, but if you have extras, you can just cut it off as well. Depending on how you want to store it. And then I store mine in my basement just in a single layer where they're not just all clustered over the top. I have them on a shelf at the moment, and that's worked really, really well for me over the years. Having them in a dark, cool area is going to help your storage quality a lot longer. If you don't have a basement, maybe find a closet that is a little bit cooler in your house that's dark. You just want to have something that is cool and dark and not warm. But honestly, that is the gist of growing garlic. I have always found it to be one of the easiest crops. The flavor of homegrown garlic honestly is unmatched. So I personally like to grow a year's worth as much as I can. That way I can make a bunch of garlic powders, make a ton of it roasted. So I love to use my freeze dryer to make garlic powder. I will say, if you don't have a freeze dryer, dehydrating your garlic is really difficult to make garlic powder. It just took forever and it gave it more of a roasted flavor. If you don't have a freeze dryer, which I'm sure most of you don't, they are such an investment. But if you do the investment, it's one of my favorite things to use, especially to make garlic powder. It's like my favorite thing to do. But if you don't, one of the things I really like to do over the years that I wanted to mention is, say your storage is starting to come up around this time of year is when your storage is starting to show signs of not storing as well. This is typically why you're planting it this time of year as well. So what I would do is I would take a bunch of it, mince it up in a blender, and then I would take tablespoon measurements and put dollops on a cookie sheet and pre-freeze it. And then that way I could have tablespoon measurements of minced garlic ready to go in the freezer. This worked so well for years before I had a freeze dryer. The one thing I will say is double bag your garlic in the freezer. this will really help it store longer if you don't have a vacuum sealer, and it'll also help contain some of that garlic smell in your freezer. So that is an option if you want to grow an abundance of garlic, a year's worth of garlic, and you're not exactly sure how to store it. That is one of those things I really enjoyed doing over the years. Without further ado, let me move this garlic here. I'll use that for dinner sometime this week. Let's do a little garlic unboxing. So I ordered from Mad River Garlic Growers, even though I honestly probably have enough of my own seed garlic to where I'd be completely fine. But I did want to powder out a lot of the stuff I grew myself this year, just so I would have enough garlic powder. So I do have some varieties in here I've definitely grown before. I didn't go too crazy on the varieties. I think I ordered 4 different ones this year. All right, so I got Georgian Fire again, which this was probably one of my favorite varieties to grow, especially to make into a powder this year, because these things are massive. They worked really well just to make a ton of powder at one time. So we have a good amount of Georgian Fire here. One of the things I saw when I originally was ordering garlic years ago, apparently Martha Stewart's favorite variety is Chestnut Red, but here is the Russian Red. These look beautiful. They look very similar to chestnut, but I love a good red garlic. All that beautiful purple striping is like, I love a good red garlic, so I am so excited about that. I ordered a pound of Russian Red. I think I ordered a pound of chestnut as well, which here's the chestnut. Man, I'm getting really lucky just grabbing these. But I really went with varieties that have done well in my garden. Oh my gosh. I thought I had a good chestnut year. It's looking like they had a good chestnut year. Chestnut did so well for me this year, and I've planted it every year, and this was my best chestnut year I've ever had. Look at the size of these garlic heads. These look so beautiful, and when you remove some more of these papery layers, that's when you see a lot more of that beautiful red striping. Oh, I'm so excited. Those look so good. I have one more, which is the soft neck variety that I grew, which I'll be planting some of my own soft necks as well. I saved some of my biggest cloves or biggest heads to plant. So if you are going to save some of your own garlic to plant, so I've done this in the past, and the one year I planted my own seed garlic was when I really noticed like clove quality truly matters. The bigger the clove, the bigger the head coming out. So always grab your biggest heads of garlic with your biggest cloves. And oh my gosh, this is one head of garlic, guys. Look at this. This is the full size of my hand. This is such a good soft neck variety. I really enjoyed the flavor of it. And you get these beautiful, huge, massive heads of garlic that have layers and layers of cloves. And this is about what mine looked like. So I really have enjoyed this variety. This is crazy. These look so beautiful. Very, very happy about that. But that is kind of my garlic unboxing here. We will be planting in about 3-ish weeks. We are still showing absolutely no signs of frost come quite yet. We have cooled down a little bit, but for the most part, we are still holding on to our heat. So we will be planting in just a few weeks, but I really wanted to get this video out there in case you guys wanted to order your seed garlic. You have plenty of time. For me, every time I've ordered from Mad River, it typically takes about, I want to say, a week to get to me, and they are still shipping. They still have plenty of varieties. So if you're looking for someone to order seed garlic from, that's the only company I've ever ordered from. This isn't sponsored. This wasn't gifted to me. I've always bought them from them. I highly suggest them, but I really, really suggest you giving growing garlic a try. It's always been a tried and true favorite for me, and it's one of my absolute favorite things to grow. Like I said, I typically have a really big, beautiful harvest at the beginning of June, and it really just gets a fire underneath me to go through those super hot, hard months of summer in the garden, because you see just a beautiful harvest right at the beginning, and it makes me really excited for the rest of the gardening season. But that kind of sums up everything to know about garlic. I know I made a little short form video about this not that long ago, but I wanted to sit down and kind of give you guys all the information. There's a lot of information when it comes to growing garlic that I felt like I couldn't put into a 1 to 2 minute long video, just because I feel like there's a lot of knowledge I have over growing it over the years. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. And if you're curious on some of my garlic harvesting in the past, I will make sure I link videos. Definitely go check that out. This last year was my favorite, best best harvest. So I'll tag it for you guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.